I'm just going to start off by saying and just making it perfectly clear that I am Team Marvel. I am Team Marvel today, yesterday, last week, in the future. Yes. Okay, we're going to be talking about Suicide Squad. I just want to put a disclaimer in there. There will be spoilers. If you haven't watched Suicide Squad and you don't want any spoilers, then please, well, don't switch off now. I mean, still listen, because I'm going to go into a bit of history about Marvel and DC. Please stick around, but just know that towards the end of this episode, there will be spoilers. You might.
Science. Technology. Medicine. Health. These four things make the world go round. Without them, we couldn't exist. This is the Monday Science Podcast, a weekly show bringing you the latest research and news in science, technology, medicine, and health, answering your questions or finding experts in the field to answer them. Your host is a pharmacist, an award-winning scientist. She leads her own research group and is the founder of King's College London Fight the Fakes. A tad bit on the qualified side. Welcome to Monday Science. Here's your host, Dr. Bahijja Raimi-Abraham.
Hello, welcome to our Thursday special. One of the reasons why I started Thursday special is that I wanted a space to be able to discuss the other things that I like. I'm just going to start off by saying and just making it perfectly clear that I am Team Marvel. I am Team Marvel today, yesterday, last week, in the future. Yes. Okay, we're going to be talking about Suicide Squad. I just want to put a disclaimer in there. There will be spoilers. If you haven't watched Suicide Squad and you don't want any spoilers, then please, well, don't switch off now. I mean, still listen, because I'm going to go into a bit of history about Marvel and DC. Please stick around, but just know that towards the end of this episode, there will be spoilers. You might want to pause, go and watch the film, then come back and then see if our thoughts are aligned. Okay, I haven't actually been to the cinema I hadn't at this point been to the cinema since the pandemic. One of the things I used to enjoy doing prior to the pandemic, I actually really enjoy going to the cinema. How I will start things off is assuming that those who are listening are drawn to the fact that it's Suicide Squad and they've heard something about it, but not necessarily understanding and knowing that it's a DC comic. And when people are having this battle between DC and Marvel, people who aren't really diehard fans would not necessarily understand. The Suicide Squad is a fictional, what we call anti-hero team. I'll explain what that means in a bit. It's an anti-hero team that was originally published by DC Comics. And the first Suicide Squad came out in 1959. And then there was a more modern version, which was in 1987. An anti-hero is a central character. It's usually like the main character of a film or a comic. And it's a character that lacks the characteristics that an audience would associate with a conventional hero. Anti-heroes tend to be ambiguous protagonists. So they tend to have like complex characters, and they also have a dark side. And Suicide Squad is a team that's made up of all these types of anti-heroes, or these types of characters which are called anti-heroes. Now I'm going to go into Marvel versus DC. One thing I will say is that a lot of people don't realize there's a lot of overlap between Marvel and DC in terms of the writers, the illustrators, the founder is very, there's a lot of overlap, but there are some differences between the two comics that I'll talk about in a bit. DC Comics first began in 1934 and Marvel started in 1939. I can't help it, we're going to talk about Marvel first. Okay, Marvel was started in 1939, and it was actually initially known as Timely Comics. And then in 1951, it became known as Atlantis Comics. And then in 1961, that's when they launched all these comics with like superhero titles like the Fantastic Four. And this was created by Stan Lee and a whole bunch of other people. Marvel have well-known superhero characters, Spider-Man, There's Iron Man, Captain America, all these names that you'd know of, Ghost Rider. A lot of people think Ghost Rider is DC Comics, but Ghost Rider is actually Marvel. There are many X-Men, Fantastic Four, Guardians of the Galaxy, Black Panther, Doctor Strange. I could go on forever. DC Comics started out under the name National Allied Publications in 1934. And it was actually, they came about as a result of the merging between the National Allied Publications and Detective Comics Inc. And along with with those two, along with the affiliated All American Publications. At that time, in 1934, around then, it was named National Comics, but people often called it DC due to the logo on the comic covers, and also due to the popularity of a series that they had called Detective Comics. The company still maintained their old name until 1977, and then they changed officially to DC Comics. The majority of DC Comics take place within their fictional DC universe, and that's where you've got a lot of characters such as well-known characters and iconic characters such as Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, Flash, Aquaman, many. And it's just important to note that both Marvel and DC Comics began during the 1930s, around World War II. And World War II had an extreme impact, and this is reflected in both comics. They did have a similar theme of war and humor. And the idea was that, during the depressive wartime, people needed something to lighten up their day. Why not a comic? And then both Marvel and DC Comics released fun and often like quirky and bizarre issues, storylines to kind of help with this. And then you have comics that have a recurring war theme within the superheroes, particularly Captain America in Marvel. That's got a very strong war theme, and Superman in DC Comics. But then after the war, both publishers changed their focus during 1960s. From the beginning, between Marvel and DC, they have totally distinct characters. DC Comics, a lot of the characters are they're characters that they're taken for granted, but they also could be, they have a power of a god. For example, Superman, he's a super powerful Kryptonian. Wonder Woman, the daughter of Zeus, who has the divine power of the god of war. And there are quite a few, but there are exceptions for the DC portfolio. For example, Batman, well-known mortal, pure mortal, but yet can stand amongst the rank of other superheroes. Marvel characters, and I'll explain why I was always so into Marvel. Marvel characters, they feature more realistic characters that can be partially explained by science, and that is why I was into Marvel growing up. I still to this day feel like my powers could kick in at any point. I'm just waiting for those. Anyway, but yeah, with Marvel, the characters, you could explain their powers with science. Marvel characters often have like a tragic trade for their powers. For example, you've got the X-Men mutants. They have so much power, but yet they're resented by society. Some iconic Marvel characters, we've talked about Captain America. He's a superhuman. He was a normal soldier, then instilled in a super soldier program, and then becomes a superhuman. Spider-Man, he got bit by a radioactive spider, but Spider-Man is a normal college or high school student. The Hulk, well known, exposed to gamma rays, which results in him becoming very green and angry. They also have the exception of these godlike characters. You've got Thor, who is son of Asgard, and these are not like typical characters for Marvel. The Suicide Squad is also known as Task Force X, and they're a team of incarcerated supervillains who have to undertake a high-risk operation. It's usually a secret mission. The members of the Suicide Squad have to participate either in order for parole, early release, or reduced prison sentence, or even, just privileges such as seeing members of their family. The thing to know with the Suicide Squad is that the missions that they go on are very well, as they say in the various films, it's like, oh, this is suicide, what you're trying to do, and they're like, yeah, that's kind of our thing. Regardless of their abilities or talent, every member of the team is expendable, and it's very interesting. It's a very interesting narrative, and the way it's portrayed in all the films, you're watching it thinking, no, 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 they're not going to kill off that main character. They've got not only the actors, but the characters themselves. But yeah, just press the button, they're killed off. It's very, very interesting. As I said, regardless of their abilities or talent, each member is expendable, and it's not expected that many of them will return. And the other thing is that they're all fitted with explosive devices in their neck to ensure that they're obedient. It's a little bit messed up. What's interesting about this film for me is that the director, James Gunn, and he directed Guardians of the Galaxy, the first one, and I believe the sequel, and they're both Marvel films. Guardians of the Galaxy is this collection of different superheroes, and they have their missions and so forth. So I can see how he would have been best placed to bring together a collection of very strong characters as well as the actors themselves. You've got a lot of very famous people, and how do you bring together a film that gives you enough overview of what's going on so you can enjoy it, but then little snippets. So I'm not saying that the reason why I enjoy this film is because of the potential Marvel influence, but I wouldn't say it is. I think it was actually a really good film compared to the first one. It's interesting because I've spoken to a few people about this, and there are a lot of people who are like, well, they slept in the first one and this and the other. I think it's just different. It's very different because for me, DC films have a very different, they just have a different way about them that I think put people off to some way. This is a warning. Spoilers are about to start. So pause the podcast now, go and watch the film, come back, let me know if you agree or not with what I've said. I thought the opening scene was really good. Before, when the film would come out, I would be the first to watch all the trailers. I might even read the plot and all that stuff. I would do a lot of stuff beforehand. And especially if it's a comic film, I would want to understand the characters a lot more. By the time I'm watching the film, there aren't really many surprises per se, but it's just like, oh, this is really cool. Whereas this time around, I decided I was just going to go in blind, other than just watching the first film again. I was just going to go in blind and see, just see how it went. So I didn't know much about, I'd seen a couple of trailers, to be fair, but the trailers didn't really give much away for me because I don't really know a lot about DC Comics. The opening scene is interesting because you see all these a lot of famous faces. So it's very easy to assume that they are all going to be part of the film, because they're all very popular people, popular actors and actresses. And yeah, I was just, okay, cool, here we go. And majority of them were killed off apart from Harley Quinn, or so we thought. Boom, boom, boom. And I thought it was really good how they were able to blend humor, the action. It was great. So I would say that for me, the opening scene, there were opening few scenes, actually, is probably an opening segment, I should say. I thought it was really good, got me hooked. The twist where you realize that the team that we've just seen and has all been killed off is actually not the main team. They were the decoys. It goes back to how each member of the team is expendable, because there were main characters, really all talented anti-heroes, and yet every single one of them was killed off apart from Harley Quinn. So that was quite interesting. Then so Idris Elba is like the leader of the team that ends up the actual team that they hope to stay alive. And I've had discussions with people where they said, oh, it felt to some extent that Idris Elba's character, who's called Bloodsport, was just simply a replacement of Will Smith's character called Deadshot in this new film. So from the last film, Will Smith's character, Deadshot, he's got great accuracy and can shoot everything, and similar to Bloodsport, so he's got great accuracy. He's very good with various different types of guns and weapons. And their backstories, both of them have they both of them have a daughter, but Will Smith's daughter actually seems to like him and he's in the child's life, whereas Idris Elba's daughter doesn't really seem to like him, and he hasn't really been present in her life. So that was quite interesting. But I thought I'm a big fan of Idris Elba anyway, and I thought he was very good. The scene, so his daughter does something, I think she steals something, and then comes to see him in prison, and he's annoyed that she's got caught stealing. It's Amanda Waller, who is the director of the Suicide Squad, and this character is played by Viola Davis. And there's a scene where Idris Elba is confronting her, his daughter. So Amanda Waller has basically said that if Idris Elba's character doesn't come on the Suicide Squad mission, then her daughter could have a high sentence and be put into an adult prison as opposed to like juvenile prison. And there's this really intense scene where Idris Elba gets a pen and it's like he tries to attack her, but he has control and he puts the pen to her throat. And it's just the intent. I love Viola Davis, but even the intensity, I was like, oh my gosh, it was a very intense scene. So seeing them together on screen was really, really intense. And it was really good. But Viola Davis, her character is just ruthless. Like from the first film, you see how she just kills the whole team because she was like that they're not even meant to know about the mission. There's still that ruthlessness is there. But it was interesting because in this film, they seem to try to. So she was always intense. There was humor. I mean, even in her intensity, she's funny and everything. Just really good acting. But then it was more around the characters and the people around her, and how there was like some comedic moments there, which is really interesting. And it was that sort of thing of, there's a point in the film where she's making a decision and she's super ruthless, her character, and then her team are not, they're like, are you really gonna kill this person off? Are you really gonna do this to this person's daughter? That seems a bit, seems a bit harsh. And then they do something and make a decision. I would have liked more backstory for the polka dot man. Anybody listening who were like, actually, there was a lot of information about the character, and that is true. There was a backstory given, but I found they brushed over the whole he's got an alien virus in him or something manifest and he has to release the virus every so often. I would have liked to know more about that character. Peacemaker, that was played by John Cena. John Cena is very funny. I like him as an actor. I used to watch him with wrestling, WWE. That's quite good. I think it's an interesting character. I've heard that there's likely to be a Peacemaker film, like solo Peacemaker film, but let's see. Rick Flagg before was like the person who leads. So whilst Amanda Waller is the director and oversees everything and is in the safety of wherever telling them what to do, Rick Flagg is actually on the ground with the team, leading everyone, telling them what to do, which is very good. I preferred Rick Flagg in this film than the first film. He seemed a little more human. He seemed like he was more willing to be part of the team, not just leading the team or maybe managing the team. I think he led the team a lot more and was a bit more, he was softer. His character was softer in this film, which was really good. Then there's the shark, the king shark, Naneo character, which was hilarious, really good comedic moments. It was actually voiced by Sylvester Stallone, which I did not know, but then now thinking back, it kind of makes sense. The character that I liked the backstory, but I didn't like their powers, was Ratcatcher. Ratcatcher knows how to manipulate rats, hence the name. But it was a bit, I didn't really like that character. Like I'm not squeamish about mice or anything, but it was just a bit, well, rats, but I just didn't like it, the superpower. But the character themselves was fine. And I'm just gonna say Weasel. I was gonna leave it there. Hilarious. So there are post-credit scenes. And this is the first Marvel film that has a post. Oh, sorry, you see, I even said it. This is the first DC film that has post-credit scenes. And at this point, they are copying Marvel at this point. But it's fine. I won't be too bitter. But I just thought, I mean, to be fair, the film, I think there are two post-credit scenes. So if you haven't seen them, go back to the cinema and watch it. But there are two post-credit scenes. One is around Weasel, which is funny. And then the other is something that gives us something away around what could be the next film, or if they're going to make this, like a series. So then there's Suicide Squad 3. I don't know. So it could be quite interesting. Overall, I did enjoy the film. I would give it, there were some cheesy parts. Harley Quinn, I haven't spoken a lot about Harley Quinn, her character. I like Margot Robbie as an actress. Again, very good actress. I know a lot of people are into the Harley Quinn character. There's a scene that I thought was hilarious where she shoots somebody because of the red flags, not the fact that this person has taken over the country and this, that, and the other. No, it's because of the red flags for relationships, and she's said she was committed to not dating toxic people. I thought that was really hilarious. But anyway, so to conclude, I thought it was really good. I actually enjoyed the film, and I'm not going to give it 5 stars. The reason why I'm not going to give it 5 stars is because, and please don't think it's because it's not Marvel. No, there were some points in the film where I did dip out a bit. The scene attacking Project Starfish, I feel like could have been tightened a bit better. I would say that from when they met Project Starfish, from that scene, and then also the Thinker, who's the lead scientist of Project Starfish, I feel that when we met that character, and then also when it got to the sort of, I guess, one of the big action parts of the film, I just felt like that could have been tighter, and I felt we could have had maybe a little bit more of a backstory about Project Starfish. I feel like I'm asking a lot for backstory, and again, that could purely be because I don't really know the character. As I mentioned, I don't really know much about DC Comics, but I just felt that they could have gone into a bit more depth into Project Starfish, other than, okay, yes, it was discovered in space, and then the starfish at the end says, oh, I just wanted to float around in space. I just felt that I needed a bit more. So I would say, okay, maybe I'll say 4.5 stars out of 5. Yes, okay, I'll say that. That was my review. I did really enjoy it. It was great to go to the cinema first time in however long, so that was fun. What did you think? Have you seen Suicide Squad? Let me know your thoughts. I'm very open to any recommendations that people might have. You can send me an email, info@mondaysciencepodcast.com, or you can just send us a DM on our social media platforms. Also, let me know if there are any other films you'd like me to review, you'd like to get my thoughts on. The next Monday Science episode, next Monday and the 30th, is going to be a review on Netflix's The Chair.
You've been listening to the Monday Science Podcast, a weekly show bringing you the latest research and news in science, technology, medicine, and health. We hope you've gotten some useful and thought-provoking info from the show, and we hope you had fun along the way. We know we did. We'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hook up with us on our website at www.mondaysciencepodcast.com. Shoot us an email at info@mondaysciencepodcast.com. Find us on Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube at Monday Science, and access episode summaries at mondayscience.medium.com. See you next week on the Monday Science Podcast.